Released in 1998, Dark City wasn't your typical Hollywood blockbuster. It was a shadowy, dreamlike labyrinth of memory, identity, and cityscapes that never saw daylight. Directed by Alex Proyas, the film dropped right before The Matrix, and for a brief moment, it felt like the future of sci-fi had arrived early, complete with trench coats, mind control, and an existential crisis or two. But behind all that noir and neon was a production full of strange choices, near disasters, and trivia that'll make you wonder how this movie even got made. Stick around for number 1. It might change how you see The Matrix forever. And hey, if you love strange, underrated 90s sci-fi deep dives like this, hit that like button and subscribe. The studio forced a narration that ruined the mystery. When Dark City first screened for test audiences, director Alex Proyas wanted them to experience it like waking up from a dream, confused, curious, and completely in the dark, pun intended. The whole point was to let viewers piece together the mystery alongside John Murdoch, the man who wakes up in a bathtub with no memory of who he is. But New Line Cinema didn't like that. The studio thought audiences would be too confused. They wanted everything explained up front, so without Proyas' approval, they slapped on a voiceover narration at the beginning that literally spelled out the plot. It told you who the strangers were, what they did, and why the city had no sun, basically giving away the entire twist before the movie even started. Proyas was furious. He later said that narration was like explaining a magic trick before you perform it. Years later, when Dark City Director's Cut was finally released, he cut the voiceover entirely, restoring the mystery he'd intended all along. Turns out, the studio didn't trust audiences to think, and that's exactly what made Dark City such a cult favorite for the ones who did. The city was literally built to confuse you. Ever felt like Dark City made no sense? Like every street led to the same place? That wasn't bad geography. That was the point. Production designer Patrick Tatopoulos, yes, the same guy who designed Monsters for Independence Day and Godzilla '98, built the entire city like a maze, a physical illusion. Sets were recycled, walls were moved between scenes, and staircases often led nowhere. If it looked like a dream that was collapsing in on itself, that's because it kind of was. The wildest part, they actually reused entire chunks of scenery from The Crow, another film by Alex Proyas. The clock tower, the rooftops, all of it was repainted, redressed, and relit to become part of this eternal night world. In other words, Dark City was built out of cinematic ghosts, fragments of another movie about death and memory. Even the city's street signs didn't mean anything. Crew members joked that if you tried to map the set, you'd end up walking in circles, just like the people trapped inside it. Some directors try to simulate disorientation. Proyas engineered it. Rufus Sewell was chosen because he looked too average. In most Hollywood sci-fi, the hero is a chiseled action star. Think Keanu Reeves, Bruce Willis, or at least someone who looks like they've seen sunlight. But Alex Proyas didn't want that. For Dark City, he wanted a man who looked ordinary. Rufus Sewell, a British actor still new to Hollywood, was cast precisely because he didn't stand out. The studio begged for someone more famous. They even suggested Tom Cruise and Johnny Depp, but Proyas refused. He said the entire movie hinged on a man who could disappear into a crowd, yet somehow make you care. During filming, Sewell had to play a character with no memories, and to sell that confusion, Proyas told him to avoid reading the full script. Seriously. Sewell only received the pages he needed for each day, forcing him to discover the story in real time, just like his character. He later joked that by the end of production, he was genuinely paranoid, unsure if the crew was filming a movie or gaslighting him. Mission accomplished, Alex. The reality-bending effects were done without CGI. Long before The Matrix froze time and spun the camera around bullets, Dark City was already bending buildings. Literally, the famous shifting city scenes, where skyscrapers twist, streets stretch, and apartments morph like nightmares, weren't digital at all. In 1997, CGI that complex would have cost more than the entire film's budget, so the effects team went old school. They built miniature city blocks by hand, then physically warped them using mechanical rigs, forced perspective, and rotating camera platforms. Every time the strangers tuned the city, someone off-camera was actually cranking gears and pulling levers. The effect looked surreal because it was real. Glass bending, walls rotating, model buildings folding like origami. Alex Proyas said he wanted the city to feel alive but sick, like it was dreaming of itself. The irony? 1 year later, The Matrix used his visual team and the same cinematographer to pull off its own world-bending illusions. So yeah, Dark City walked so the Matrix could bullet time.
I call them strangers. They abducted us and brought us here. This city, everyone in it, is their experiment. They mix and match our memories as they see fit, trying to divine what makes us unique. One day, a man might be an inspector. The next, someone entirely different.
Kiefer Sutherland talked weird. On purpose. If you thought Kiefer Sutherland's voice in Dark City sounded bizarre, like a cartoon villain having an asthma attack, that wasn't bad acting. It was a deliberate, deeply unsettling choice. Sutherland played Dr. Schreber, the stammering scientist who helps the strangers manipulate human memories. But instead of doing a normal mad scientist voice, he decided to model his entire speech pattern on a stroke victim. Yeah. According to interviews, Sutherland wanted Schreiber to sound like someone who'd been partially erased, a man whose mind had already been tampered with. He practiced stuttering mid-word, cutting off his sentences, and even holding his breath during takes to make himself lightheaded, all to sound more broken. The result? Half the audience thought the audio was corrupted. The other half couldn't stop watching. Alex Proyas loved it, though. He said Sutherland's performance felt like it came from another reality, which honestly fits Dark City perfectly. A world where even the people sound like they've been reprogrammed. The cast started forgetting their own lines and themselves. Method acting can get intense, but Dark City took it somewhere darker because nearly every scene took place at night, under harsh lights, fake fog, and recycled sets. The cast started to lose all sense of time. They'd shoot for days without sunlight, moving between rooms that were literally the same set, redressed differently. Jennifer Connelly once said, "It felt like deja vu. Every hallway looked like the last one." I stopped knowing what scene we were in. It got weirder. To keep performances raw, Alex Proyas constantly shuffled shooting schedules, giving actors scripts out of order, and sometimes not telling them which version of their character they were playing. Memory intact or memory wiped. Rufus Sewell later admitted he'd walk onto set and ask, "Wait, who am I today?" Even Kiefer Sutherland said he began to feel like the movie was manipulating him. We were all exhausted talking about memory and reality all day, and then realizing we couldn't remember our lines. By the end of production, the boundaries between fiction and fatigue had blurred completely. It wasn't just a movie about lost memories. It caused them. The Matrix literally borrowed Dark City's world. Everyone jokes that Dark City walked so the Matrix could run, but that's not a metaphor. The Wachowskis actually borrowed its world. When Warner Brothers greenlit The Matrix in 1998, the studio needed sets to build the real world. Dystopian cityscapes, rooftops, alleys. So instead of constructing new ones, they reused Dark City's massive soundstage sets in Sydney, Australia, just months after Alex Proyas wrapped production. That famous opening scene of Trinity running across a dark, rain-soaked rooftop, that's the exact same rooftop where Rufus Sewell escaped the strangers. Same bricks, same skyline, different simulation. Even the cinematographer, Dariusz Wolski, later said the two movies share the same DNA. One's about losing your memories, the other's about losing your reality. It's as if The Matrix wasn't just spiritually inspired by Dark City. It was literally built on top of it. Turns out, Neo wasn't the first man to wake up and realize his city was fake. The strangers came from the director's nightmares. Those pale, bald villains who float around whispering about tuning? Yeah, they weren't dreamed up by a costume designer. They were dreamed up by Alex Proyas. Literally. Years before Dark City, Proyas kept a recurring nightmare. Faceless men in black coats standing at the end of his bed, watching him sleep. They never moved, never spoke. They just stared. When he finally started writing the script, he realized the image fit perfectly with his idea of alien beings trying to imitate humanity, but getting it wrong. The costume department made it worse. In a good way, they dressed the strangers in 1940s Undertaker suits and gave them translucent makeup so veins would show under the studio lights. To make their movements uncanny, Proyas told the actors to move like insects, pretending to be human. And when the child stranger, played by a 10-year-old boy named Satya Gumbert, appeared on set, even the crew got uncomfortable. The kid's voice was dubbed over by an adult actor, creating that eerie, unnatural tone. Proyas later admitted that shooting those scenes felt like being inside his nightmare again. Except this time, The nightmare was looking back through the camera. The trailer spoiled the whole movie. In 30 seconds, imagine watching The Sixth Sense, and the trailer straight up told you Bruce Willis was dead. That's basically what happened to Dark City. When New Line Cinema got the finished film, the marketing department freaked out. They didn't know how to sell it. It wasn't horror, it wasn't action, it wasn't romance, it was weird. So instead of embracing the mystery, they panicked and made a trailer that explained everything. The voiceover literally announced, in a world controlled by beings who can stop time, one man has the power to fight back. It showed the strangers, the tuning sequences, even the final city reveal, all before the movie hit theaters. Alex Proyas begged them not to release it, saying it ruined the film's biggest twist, that the city was floating in space, but the studio doubled down, insisting audiences wouldn't buy tickets unless they knew what was happening. They were wrong. The movie bombed at the box office, only to become a cult classic later, when fans discovered the director's cut and realized they'd been robbed of the mystery. So yeah, Dark City didn't just explore mind control, it fell victim to it. Dark City predicted the age of manufactured identity. Back in 1998, nobody was talking about memory hacking or digital identity. There was no Facebook, no deepfakes, no algorithm deciding who you are. But Dark City somehow saw it coming. At its core, the film isn't really about aliens. It's about manipulation. The strangers literally rewrite people's memories to create new personalities overnight. One day you're a cop, the next you're a serial killer. And you never question it because every photo, every object, every feeling says it's true. That's not just creepy. That's social media before social media. Decades later, tech writers began calling Dark City the first true film about data identity. The idea that someone, or something, could rewrite who you are based on the information you consume. Even the movie's eerie city resets mirror algorithmic cycles. Same faces, same roles, just shuffled differently to keep you distracted. Alex Proyas didn't mean to predict the digital age, he just wanted to explore the fragility of memory. But in 2025, it feels less like a metaphor and more like a documentary. The ending wasn't about escaping the city. It was about becoming its god. Most viewers remembered the ending of Dark City as a victory. John Murdoch defeats the strangers, gains their powers, and brings sunlight to the world. Cue emotional music, camera pans out, hope, right? But Alex Proyas said in multiple interviews, that wasn't a happy ending. It was a trap. By the finale, Murdoch doesn't escape the simulation. He becomes its new architect. The strangers are gone, but the city remains floating in space, a fake world built on rewritten memories. Murdoch just inherited their role. He can tune reality now, but he's still alone inside an illusion. The sun he creates, artificial. The ocean, programmed. The dream never ends. It just changes masters. Proyas once put it this way: when you control everything, you stop being human. It reframes the entire film, from a story about liberation into a quiet horror, about power, identity, and loneliness. The man who wanted to remember who he was becomes the god of forgetting. So no, Dark City doesn't end with freedom. It ends with the most elegant prison ever built. One made of light, love, and the illusion of choice. So there you have it, 11 weird, haunting facts that prove Dark City wasn't just another 90s sci-fi movie. It was a waking dream, wrapped in noir, philosophy, and pure cinematic madness. In an era obsessed with explosions and happy endings, Dark City dared to whisper something far more unsettling. That reality is fragile, memory is a trick, and sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel isn't salvation, it's just another illusion. For the millennials who grew up on The Matrix, Fight Club, and The Truman Show, this film was the strange cousin you didn't understand at the time. But now, it feels eerily familiar, because in 2025, when our feeds rewrite who we are every day, maybe Dark City wasn't warning us about aliens. Maybe it was warning us about ourselves. Got a favorite weird moment we missed? Drop it in the comments. And tell us which 90s movie you want us to dig into next. And hey, if you love deep dives into forgotten brilliance and cinematic weirdness, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because we're just getting started.